remember how 1956 began, with Britain in the grip of the coldest weather most of us had ever known? It was as though nature was warning us of the kind of summer we'd be getting. All over Europe, the big freeze-up spread, though Parisians, like ourselves, made the best of it. But ice in the park is one thing, and ice at sea is quite another. Hundreds of square miles of the Baltic were frozen solid. The white blanket descended on New York a few weeks later, but most surprised of all were the people of Rome, where it never snows, or so they thought. In one part of Italy at least, the cold was welcome, at Cortina, where the Winter Olympiad opened the Olympic year. The men's ski jump was a triumph for the Finns, who won first and second places. Snow and ice were a constant hazard on long stretches of the Monte Carlo Rally, the toughest test of cars and drivers in the world. Victory went to a British trio driving a Jaguar, Adams, Bigger and Johnston. Another British triumph was the Comet 3's record-breaking world trip, piloted by Cunningham and Brugger. But as the world shrinks, its problems grow. The troubled island of Cyprus was constantly in the news, sometimes with schoolboy riots, which were ugly but not deadly, and sometimes with murder. The spread of terrorism led to the banishment of the Cypriot leader, Archbishop Macarius. A bright chapter in the early months of the year was the royal visit to Nigeria, and perhaps the most memorable event of that crowded tour was the Royal Durbar at Kaduna, the northern capital, with its exotic dances and its brilliant climax when the Queen and the Duke watched the Jahi Judge. Aviation history was made by Peter Twiss in the Fairey Delta II, which became the fastest plane in the world at 1,132 miles an hour, smashing the world record by the fantastic margin of 308 miles an hour. The Grand National, watched by 250,000 people, was as thrilling as ever, and for the first time we filmed it from a travelling camera. The half-dozen favourites included 2 entries by the Queen Mother, Devon Loch and Matu Vu. Over the final jumps, the Queen Mother saw Devon Loch take the lead, clear away from ESB and Gentle Moir. But with 40 yards to go, Devon Loch collapsed, leaving ESB to win. The most amazing finish in Grand National history. When Bulgarin and Khrushchev paid their spring visit to Britain and sat in apparent friendship with our country's rulers, many began to hope the Cold War was thawing for good. Russia had astonished the world by denouncing Stalinism, a move which was to have vast repercussions behind the Iron Curtain. But the future was still a mystery. Another mystery concerned the visiting Russian warships, near which naval frogman Commander Krabb disappeared. Was he spying? The silent service remained silent. The wedding of the year, without any doubt, was the marriage of Prince Rainier of Monaco to film star Grace Kelly. A modern fairy tale which almost monopolized the headlines, at least until the cup final came along to bring us back to normal. White-shirted Birmingham were hot favourites against Manchester City. But what a surprise Manchester gave us. Within 3 minutes, Joe Hayes had put them 1 up. Birmingham equalised, Manchester made it 2-1, and then Bobby Johnston wriggled through for a brilliant third to clinch the victory. What a year for Manchester. United topped the league and City won the cup. But the hero of the match was Bert Trautmann, who defended Manchester's goal with grim courage in spite of a neck injury, which was to put him in plaster for weeks to come. The derby was the wettest for many years, but it takes more than rain to spoil the greatest classic of them all. Once again, there was a big French challenge, a third of the field of 27. Coming into the last furlong, Lavandin was in the lead. Monteval on the outside left his run too late, and Lavandin won by a neck. An historic event was the Queen's review of 300 holders of the Victoria Cross to mark the centenary of that most honoured of all medals. At Wimbledon, the men's singles ended in an all-Australian final with Lou Hode, at the far end, defeating his boyhood friend Ken Rosewall by 3 sets to 1. This pair of 21-year-olds won the doubles too. In the women's singles, Britain's Angela Buxton reached the final but lost to Shirley Fry. Then Len Hutton was knighted, and his tradition was proudly maintained by England's test team, especially Big Jim Laker, who made hay of Keith Miller and the Australians by taking 19 wickets in 2 innings of the 4th test. The 19th was Len Maddox. Laker dispatched him LBW, and the Ashes were England's. Jim Laker's wonderful achievement broke all test records, and everyone came forward to congratulate him, victims and all. From America, the land of new ideas, came one of the oddest yet, a rowboat that flies. Well, why not? Tragedy in the Atlantic. The end of the 29,000-ton Italian luxury liner Andrea Doria, after colliding with a Swedish liner Stockholm in a fog. She sank in a few hours. A disaster which never should have happened. Neither should the dispute which brought to a standstill the giant BMC car factories after 6,000 men had been sacked as redundant. Feelings ran high. The union said there should have been consultation. Some men backed the strike, some didn't. But they joined forces at once when fascist speakers tried to take a hand. That was one kind of intervention nobody wanted. At the Farnborough Air Display, the emphasis was on new jet engines, a field in which Britain has won a leading position and is holding it. One British jet triumph of the year was, strangely enough, not in the air, but on water. Donald Campbell's smashing of his own world speed record in the fabulous Bluebird on Coniston Water. 225 miles an hour. Visitors to Britain? Plenty. But to Liberace's fans, only one who mattered. Then there was Nina, the lady of the 5 hats. She was here quite a while. For the 4-jet Avro Vulcan, largest Delta aircraft in the world, a brilliant round-the-world flight came to a tragic end without warning in a heap of burning wreckage on a runway of London Airport. 4 men lost their lives. But Bomber Command Chief Sir Harry Broadhurst, who was acting as co-pilot, was thrown clear by his ejector seat as the Vulcan crashed. So was the pilot, squadron leader Donald Howard. Years of patient work were crowned with success when the Queen opened Calder Hall and sent its output flowing into the national grid.
It is with pride that I now open Calder Hall, Britain's first atomic power station.
Electricity from atomic power for homes and factories. The beginning of a new era. Meanwhile, halfway around the world in Kenya, the grim Mau Mau chapter was closing with the capture of Dedan Kimathi, the brain behind the terrorists. But with the news from Budapest, the world picture suddenly darkened. Hungary's bid for independence, at first apparently successful, was remorselessly crushed by Soviet tanks. Peaceful coexistence became a mockery as the guns thundered. Russia was denounced, even by former friends. And in the ruins of Budapest, the Cold War was reborn with a vengeance. But when Israel invaded Egypt, Cold War became hot war for a few critical days. Britain and France moved in, declaring that the combatants must be separated, the fighting stopped, and the Suez Canal safeguarded. Commando and paratroop units took control of Port Said and the northern entrance to the canal. The battle was sharp, but brief. Allied troops soon dealt with the pockets of Egyptian resistance, and within a few days, they had the situation in hand. All was quiet in Port Said, but in the councils of the world, opinion was sharply divided. Britain and France accepted a compromise. They would hand over to a United Nations police force, provided it was effective. The UN force was rapidly built up to strength, and as they moved in, the British and French moved out. Their job was done, and brilliantly. They had earned their Christmas at home. But many questions remain unanswered. Their solution will be the United Nations' biggest test. What is to be the future of Egypt and the Suez Canal? 1957 will show.